I keep hearing people say they bought a cheap starter welder for a few $100s, only to find the machine sputters when they try to tackle real aluminum sheet and the whole project ends up on hold. That hesitation, spending a little now and paying a lot later in wasted time and material, is exactly why I wanted to dig deeper before hitting record. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. The question I kept asking myself was, does this 200 amp ACDC unit actually give you the control you need for thin metal work without turning the whole shop into a guessing game? First off, this isn't a single process torch. It's a combo TIG/MMA machine that runs both AC and DC, and it throws in a pulse function, high frequency start, and a foot pedal for fine heat tweaking. For anyone who spends even a few hours a month welding aluminum, whether you're building a custom bike frame, repairing a marine hull, or just putting together a lightweight drone chassis, that kind of flexibility can be a real time saver. The high-frequency start, for example, eliminates the need for a separate scratch start torch, which means you can spark a clean arc on fresh aluminum without the typical arc blow that cheap units often produce. What really sold me on the design is the way the pulse heating works. In a pulse TIG setup, the arc cycles between high and low current, giving the molten pool a short burst of intense heat followed by a cooling period. In practice, that means the metal you're welding stays just hot enough to flow, but not so hot that you end up with excessive burn-through on a 1mm sheet. I tested it on a 1.2mm aluminum panel for a custom bracket, and the welds held up under a torque test that would normally crack a weld from a standard constant current torch. The ability to dial in the pulse width and frequency from the digital control panel made it feel less like you were guessing and more like you were actually shaping the heat input. The machine also boasts a wave AC frequency balance feature. In layman's terms, that smooths out the alternating current to keep the arc stable at higher welding speeds. For a shop that needs to move quickly, say you're producing a batch of aluminum brackets for a prototype, you can push the travel speed without seeing the typical arc flicker that causes porosity or blowholes. I ran a quick speed comparison. At 10 centimeters per minute, the welds looked clean. Crank it up to 25 centimeters per minute and the high-frequency control kept the bead consistent, which is a nice surprise for a unit in this price range. Now, let's talk about the practical downsides. The first thing most people notice is the size and weight. This isn't a portable, backpack-friendly unit you can toss into a van and set up in 5 minutes. The chassis feels more like a small benchtop machine, and you'll need a dedicated 240V outlet with at least a 30-amp breaker. If you're a hobbyist who only has a 120V garage outlet, you'll either need a step-up transformer or you'll be stuck using the lower end of the current range, which limits the thin sheet advantages. That power requirement alone filters out a chunk of the casual DIY crowd. Another subtle trade-off is the learning curve. Because the machine offers so many knobs, pulse width, frequency, balance, hot start settings, the initial setup can be intimidating. I spent about an hour just reading the manual and watching a few tutorial videos before I felt comfortable dialing in the right parameters for a 2mm aluminum piece. If you're new to TIG welding, you'll probably need to invest some extra time, or maybe a quick class, to avoid the temptation of just crank the dial up and end up with a messy puddle. The digital display is clear, but it doesn't have preset recipes. Everything is manual, which can be a strength for experienced welders but a hurdle for beginners. Who should consider buying this? If you already have a basic welding setup and are looking to expand into thin aluminum work without buying a dedicated high-end TIG machine, this is a solid middle ground. It's also a good fit for small shops that need both AC for aluminum and DC for steel, and that can afford a dedicated circuit. Think automotive restorers who need to patch aluminum body panels one day and weld mild steel chassis the next, or hobbyists building lightweight frames where precise heat control matters more than raw power. Who should skip it? If you're a pure hobbyist who only works with steel and doesn't plan to tackle aluminum, the AC side and pulse features are overkill, and you'll be paying for capabilities you never use. Also, anyone without access to a proper 240V line should look for a machine that runs on standard household voltage or consider a portable inverter-based welder instead. Finally, if you're after a plug-and-play experience with preset weld programs, you'll probably be frustrated by the manual tuning required here. In terms of real-world performance, the strengths shine when you need clean, narrow welds on thin metal.